Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Jasper Nathaniel. He is the writer of the Infinite Jaz newsletter on Substack. Jasper, thanks for joining us. You just had a piece that was published in Zateo. Before we get that, I mean, if people have been following your Substack, they know that since October 7th, you started to report from the West Bank. Why the West Bank?
Well, yeah, good question. Actually, I was right after October 7th. By the way, thanks for having me, Sam, Emma, team. I was doing a lot of reporting on the way October 7th was sort of manifesting in New York, and I was covering the protests, and I went down to DC for the big March for Palestine. And I was getting so wrapped up in the culture war here that I sort of felt myself becoming like detached from the actual war that was going on. And honestly, I wanted to just get a little bit closer, just to sort of reground myself in what this was all about. To be honest, I did look for about 10 minutes if there was a way to get to Gaza. Very quickly decided that was not going to happen for a number of reasons. So then I just put out some feelers and figured out that I could get into the West Bank.
What, I'm just curious, like broadly speaking, what was your perceptions of the West Bank beforehand? I mean, you know, I think you've written and spoken about how you were raised Jewish, and you had this perspective on Israel that came from that background. But I'm curious as to your perspective on the West Bank before you went there.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, look, I knew that I knew what was going on there for the most part. I understood there was a military occupation, of course. I understood that there were, it's a literal apartheid state there, two sets of laws for two different people. I had read a lot of what there was to read, but there was just something essential that I didn't actually quite understand until I went there. And the way I've described it, it's the pervasiveness of the cruelty. It's not as if, you have Palestinians going about living their normal lives and then, they run into a roadblock, or they run into a soldier in a bad mood or something. It's everywhere. It's like in the air. The soldiers, the settlers are making their lives hell in every way imaginable. And, honestly, like a lot of people have said to me, how did you not know that? And I don't know, I guess I didn't fully understand it. But once I got there, I realized, there's just simply no escaping the cruelty when you're in the West Bank if you're a Palestinian.
Tell us the story of Zakaria al-Adra. Like, how did you meet him, his family, and then did you know them before this situation took place?
No, the first time I went to the West Bank was in January. And I wanted to visit Masafer Yatta, which is a region in the South Hebron Hills, which it's been in the news a fair amount lately for people who pay attention to this stuff. There's been some really great reporting in 972 magazine about it. The reason this place is under such a brutal siege is because in the 80s, it was named a military training zone. Which basically, it means exactly what it sounds like. Soldiers can just be firing their weapons there and running drills and things like that. And actually at the time, Ariel Sharon, who was a military leader of some sort at that time, explicitly said, we're doing this, we're making this a military training zone so that we can claim it as Jewish land for later. So, the pretext was just that, a pretext. And he was very explicit about that. But for decades, there's been this battle between the Palestinians there and the government and the military who are trying to get them out. It escalated in 2022 when a Supreme Court decision basically rejected their appeal to being displaced. But what makes it so there's this sort of government and military siege. But what makes it even worse is that you have these really brutal settlers who live in this region. Some of the, what I write about in the article, of course, is like the roots of these Jewish terrorists, many of whom actually come from this area. But anyway, to get back to your question, I'm sure we'll get to that stuff. I went to this village at Tuwani, And I was just introduced to Zachariah and his family. I had seen the video of him getting shot 2 months earlier, but I didn't know him at all. And while I was talking to him, he was telling me his story. He had actually just gotten out of the hospital that day. While I was talking to him, we hear this like commotion outside, and the settlers had come back, as they do almost every day, with their giant guns. Some of them were probably soldiers. You can't tell the difference because the settlers dress like soldiers now. They came back. They started firing their weapons in the air, pushing the shepherds around, intimidating, menacing people. And so I'm literally, talking to this man who has been shot by a settler a few months ago. He's with his 4 young children, including newborn twins, right outside the door. The settlers from the outpost who shot him are outside, just menacing and being violent again.
We should say you can see that video on Zateo's website. It's disturbing to watch. I mean, it really is just. There's a real quality to like. This is just like gang. Like they're just a gang, but there's no. It's not gang warfare. It's just a gang that is coming in and being brutal. And
formalized now, right? I mean, since over the past few months, it was formally given Smotrich, his kind of gang of extremists have basically been given authority over the West Bank, if I'm not mistaken, Jasper, kind of removing all the pretense that this is some sort of military training site, as opposed to designating it as a military training site to make it easier to bulldoze, take homes, kill people, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is in the West Bank, it's like there's violence and destruction, and then sometimes they then sort of retroactively legitimize it with laws. Like a lot of these illegal outposts have been since recognized as settlements, which makes them legal under Israeli law. So the law, to a certain extent, doesn't matter because they're either breaking the law and then later it's being legitimized, they're breaking the law or they're not being convicted. Like 3% of violent settlers are ever actually convicted, or they're not breaking the law. They're being violent and destructive within the law. And I should also just say that like what I write about in this article is that the man who shot Zachariah, Yitzhak Nir, his father was a convicted terrorist. He shot up an Islamic university, killed 3 people, wounded 29 others with his brother. And they were part of this movement of really extreme religious, fanatical settlers who were very clear in what their aim was in being in the West Bank. They were there to start a war with the Palestinians that would end in either the death of all the Palestinians or the Palestinians' expulsion. So it's not as if they were there to try to, live there and have a good life and live, potentially in side by side. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. They were building outposts in places that they knew were going to cause problems. They were, instigating violence. And, that's exactly what's happened, of course, is like there's this constant violence now.
All right. We just jumped over something, though, that I think is like really sort of what your piece really captures. You named the Jewish settler. I mean, we see the video. We see who shot Zachariah. The guy shows up when Zachariah comes out of the hospital. He's outside the door. They know it. I mean, this is the part that I think is like sort of like the, as if it's like sort of our classic sort of mafia mob gangland thing. But it's like they're all on, not literally on meth, but they're acting like it on some level. But the point is, everybody knows who it is. And so, I mean, take it from there, because this is the part that I don't think that people fully understand. We hear the U.S. government is, making what I think is just sort of like platitudinous issue out of settler violence in the West Bank. And supposedly this isn't even at the level of an apartheid regime where there doesn't seem to be any accountability whatsoever, even in the context of a system that has 2 separate laws. Like, theoretically, it's still not legal for a settler to attempt to kill and shoot just a Palestinian civilian for no reason whatsoever. But so how is this guy identified, and what has been the process of has he been reported? Like, why is he now able to continue to terrorize his family?
Let me just first clarify that we don't know that Yitzhak Nir himself has been back to Tuwani, but other settlers from the outpost have been back. But okay, so this was also one of the most shocking things to me, which again, in hindsight, especially after seeing what's happening in Gaza, it's like, of course there's no accountability. But to me, it's like, it's on video. Clearly there's no, legitimate claim of self-defense. Like, how could this guy still be walking free? So basically, this is what happened. So this was on October 13th. It was, just under a week after October 7th. The civilian security squad at this outpost had just been armed by the military. So they were given assault rifles, American assault rifles, I should say, and military uniforms so that they could, be like conscripted into this war against the Palestinians, really. And what they did is, they went down. The Yitzhak Nir would later claim that he had a report from Shin Bet, which is Shin Bet, which is one of the intelligence agencies in Israel, that there was an attack coming from Tuwani, which is almost certainly bunk. There's no armed resistance in this village, I should say. Like, these are farmers and shepherds. There's no guns here. There's no violence. So they go down. He claims that after they got this report, they heard a commotion, and they went down for, in their capacity as the armed security. He goes down and he shoots Zachariah. And if you watch the video, you see them sort of like hiding behind a boulder, as if they're in war, when, again, they've just entered this completely peaceful farming village, like hiding behind a boulder, coming out with their guns, and he shoots Zachariah, and then he is called back by a guy in military fatigues, again, as if they're in war. So, like, to a certain extent, they're cosplaying here. They're pretending that they're in a war when they're actually just shooting unarmed people in a farming village. But what happens is, immediately after, and I should say, like, just getting Zachariah to the hospital was a debacle because of all the roadblocks, and he almost bled out in the car on the way there. They couldn't even get an ambulance to him. But what happens is the police, according to the court documents, the police go to investigate the next day. They immediately identify Yitzhak Nir as the man who shot him. I don't know if that was from the video or if somebody just outed him, but like, they immediately knew it was him. He told them that Zachariah intended to throw a stone at him. Intended to throw a stone. How he knew that, anybody's guess. You can watch the video yourself and see if it appears that he intended to throw a stone. But that's what he says. The police, again, according to court documents, they take away his weapon, but they don't do anything else. They don't take him into the station. They don't investigate. So then that same day, Zachariah, who is, he's in the ICU at this point, really touch and go. His father and brother go to the local police station, which is, Israeli military police, and they try to file a complaint. And the police say the victim has to come in here and file a complaint himself, a criminal complaint. And they say, well, the victim, as you can see in this video here, which has 1 million views or something, was shot in the abdomen, is, potentially going to die in the hospital. They said, well, he has to come here himself and file the complaint. So they said, well, why don't you go to the hospital and take his testimony? They refused to do it. So again, according to the court documents, there's a 5-month investigation, and then no arrests are made. The case is closed. So then finally, once Zachariah is well enough to travel, this is just in July, so 9 months later, he and his lawyer actually do go, he and his attorney, who's an Israeli Jewish guy, go to the police station and file that criminal complaint. So allegedly the case has been reopened, but I haven't been able to get any details on if there's another investigation going on. I should say they also did get a restraining order on Nir, so he is for 180 days not allowed to go into Tuwani and not allowed to carry a weapon. Now, why he should ever be allowed to go there is anybody's guess, but so that's where it stands today.
How indicative, lastly, of like, this is, one individual story, and people could say, well, there was a bureaucratic snafu. How indicative of is this, based upon your having spent a fairly considerable amount of time over the past 8 months there, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just put it this way. When I was traveling around with my fixer, we kept meeting these people who had been maimed by bullets, by IDF bullets or settler bullets, or they had lost a son or a father or somebody to the IDF. And I would ask them, what was your recourse after? Who did you call? What was the investigation? What was what were the proceedings like? And Zaid would sort of smile, my fixer, and then he would translate, and they would look at him like they didn't understand the question. Because just the concept of there actually being any recourse against this violence from soldiers and settlers is so absurd that people didn't really even understand the question that I was asking. So this is incredibly typical. His attorney said it himself. This happens all the time. It's happened since well before October 7th. It got worse in 2022 when, this new Israeli government came together and further emboldened this violence. But yeah, the only difference here is that this was caught on video. But otherwise, this happens every single day.
Jasper Nathaniel, writer of the Infinite Jaz newsletter on Substack, also a great follow on Instagram as well. And this piece in Zatea, we'll put a link to it. The video is there, which has been, seen, like you say, at least 1 million times. You would think that would be sufficient evidence. But no, it gives you an indication of essentially what the value of Palestinian life is, as far as the Israeli occupying force considers it in the West Bank, where, again, remind you, there is no Hamas. Jasper, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.